academic or you're a regular guy. We have to be fearless.
FrontlineTV.com.
Dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, go to crusadechannel.com and kick the tires a little bit. We emphasize to everybody, we need to support all those out there who are spreading the truth in this sea of lies that we're living in. Joe and I are doing our best in where we are. We would ask you to support us at thefrontlinetv.com, thefrontlinetv.com, and wherever you see us on social media. You're looking at the video, you like what we say, there's a like button, there's a subscribe button, there's a notification button. There's all those things you could do that all help us out in some way, okay? But crusadechannel.com, again, we're all on the same team. We're all doing the same thing. We're all battling in this spiritual battle. So we would ask you to go and kick the tires at crusadechannel.com so that you could see what my church has going on and that whole lineup down there. And we think that you're going to like it and want to become a premium member for Crusade Channel. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are going to follow Joe and I on social media, you can find us at the Frontline TV on YouTube, as the King Dude likes to refer to it. And that's where, you know, we're having all these, what Joe and I consider to be necessary conversations, okay? And they are necessary because we live in a time, Joe Rossinello, Father Carapi used to say, remember we quote him all the time, when darkness becomes the light, light becomes the darkness. That's the time we're living in, all right? The lies have become the truth, at least that's what we're told. The truth to become lies. Boys could be girls. Girls could be boys. Remember Bill Murray in Ghostbusters? Dogs laying down with cats. Total pandemonium. That's what it is. All right. And what is the biggest lie, I think, right now? The lie that's being lobbed, like underhanded softball. It's being lobbed right over the plate for you at the plate to just knock it out of the park. But it's a lie, is the perverted notion of what it means to be free, of what freedom is. And this is a problem because the way they sell their agenda is by saying, oh, you might not disagree with it, but as another person, are they free to do this, that, or the other thing? Are they free to kill their baby in the womb? Are they free if they're a man to marry another man? Okay, it's like all these perverted notions of what freedom is. And nobody in modern memory, nobody embodies the perverted ideal of freedom in America than Hugh Hefner. The founder of Playboy, okay? The perpetual teenager, okay? And there was an article that Joe and I came across that we want to talk about, and it literally is titled, Hugh Hefner's Twisted Vision of Freedom. But he died a couple of years ago, but there's a reason why we're talking about it now. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Rossinello on the Crusade Channel.
As Joe said, David Larson in Crisis Magazine brings us this one on Hugh Hefner. This is what Larson had to say. This is just an excerpt, small excerpt. Hefner considered himself a very moral guy, in quotations, and above all, a Playboy philosopher. All his actions were seemingly justified as a way to defeat the religious repression of his Methodist parents and the American culture in general, aiming to replace it with the idea of this complete freedom. But each episode of the show, and again, we're talking about the documentary on A&E, shows Hefner's twisted idea of freedom, his kingdom of self-gratification, and insiders in the documentary reveal all the lives of people that came across his empire. Basically, a lot of drug overdoses, suicides, sexual exploitations, and excess of all kinds. In his own words, and this is Hefner, much of my life has been like an adolescent dream of an adult life. If you were still a boy in almost a Peter Pan kind of way and could have just have a perfect life, that is the life I've invented for myself. It's interesting. I mean, I have known about Hugh Hefner. I did see a documentary, this is outside of this article, about his life. His parents were very strict. So I think, like, clearly he was a genius in the sense that he created this idea of Playboy. I mean, he created an empire, very intelligent man. I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. But I do think he was acting out. You know, his parents had a very strict upbringing and he acted out. And he created, like he said, he created this image of himself. And frankly, ultimately, he destroyed, you know, this image has destroyed many lives. And frankly, any sin, when you embrace it to the degree that Hefner embraced it, destroys your life. And there's no question about that.
Well, no, and of course you're gonna. I can hear people now. They're out there going, he lived till 91 years old. He lived completely free. He died a happy man. He died a slave. And that's what people don't want to hear. That's why this documentary, and Joe, I don't know if you gave the title exactly, but it's an A&E documentary called Secrets of Playboy. So it's going to be a 10-part series, and they get into all this. But here's the thing. He was fighting, or I guess in his own words, rebelling against his Methodist upbringing. His parents were very
Yes,
strict.
correct.
Okay. So then they're strict. And of course, what that means in the modern era is sexual. All right. So that they were strict in a sexual way, probably telling him don't have sex till you get married. Very probably traditional minded in that regard. But let's get into this a little bit. All right. He became a slave. Why do we know that? Why do we know that? Okay. Is it possible that parents could be a little overbearing at times? Yeah, sure, they can, especially loving parents, because they want to keep you off the wrong path. And it could come across as repression. But look at the way he lived his life. Let's get into some of we're not going to get graphic out there for all you out there at the Crusade channel. We're not getting graphic. We're just keeping it on the surface, but you'll understand where we're going with this. Joe, this guy was completely enslaved to the idea, and he said it, a Peter Pan life, meaning he never wanted to grow up. Some of the things that they said, all right, these are people that were very closest to him or very close to him. They said that he had to have self-gratification all day long. What does that mean? He drank 40 Pepsis a day, okay? He had to have M&Ms next. Now, leaving all the sex aside, I'm going somewhere with this, okay? He needed to have constant pleasure. Whether that pleasure came from food, whether that pleasure came from drugs, whether that pleasure came from sex. He was a man that never grew up. And because he was smart, you're right, Joe, he was smart. He was insightful like the Marquis de Sade was insightful. He knew that you could control people through sex, okay? And you could sell that sex as sexual liberation, okay? So in that way, he was smart. But he made enough money to do what, Joe? All he did was want to be gratified all day long. Joe, last time I checked, that's a slave. For the simple reason is this, and I'm going to hand it over to you. He could never, ever, ever change his life because he was completely enslaved to his own animal gratification. That's that's the paradox here.
I think you got to blow out the idea of what is a slave, because I think a lot of people, I sometimes, like, when I listen to my own voice as well as to yours, I try to put ourselves in the position of, say, someone on Facebook, and they're saying these guys just wish they were like Hugh Hefner, or what are you talking about? Like, I do. Plus, I was an auditor, and I always try to think as a person from the outside looking in, and I want to just blow that out a little bit. You know, ultimately, when you embrace something fully, it loses its flavor. Like, there is no weekend without working Monday through Friday. You would not enjoy Saturday and Sunday. It's just the way human beings operate. It's like, whether you like it or not, that's the way it is. You wouldn't, if you ate steak every single day and lobster every single day, you lose flavor for it. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was a time in my life I traveled a lot, and I would stay, because I worked for big banks, I would stay at very nice places all over the country. The Pegasus, the Mandarin, the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, all over America. I'm going to be honest with you. After a while, you could care less. Like most people, they'll hear that, they'll be like, oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. No. Trust me when I tell you, you're tired, you worked all day, you could care less. And it's the same thing with Hefner. Like people could say, you look in things, it's just the way we are as humans. Things lose their flavor after a while because ultimately, as St. Augustine has said very correctly, only God completely satisfies. Now, I want to explore that because people like will listen to like what you just said and they're like, he just wants to be Hugh Hefner. He just wishes he was. No, because like at the end of the day, I have experienced very nice things. And I'm going to tell you right now, after a while, they mean nothing.
Nothing.
And that's a fact. Like it's just a fact.
Yo, there was a time in my life I thought that that's what I wanted to do with my life. Okay, I was an actor, then I was a stockbroker. I thought I was going to make millions of dollars. Okay, now I'm not saying I wanted to go to the Playboy mansion. Okay, but that type of life is something that I actually thought in my 20s I wanted to have. Never thought about getting married. All I wanted was to drink Johnny Walker Black, smoke cigarettes, and quite frankly, be with women. That's what I thought I wanted. I mean, it's so superficial when I look back on it. I'm ashamed of it. But you want to know what the pursuit of that did? Because Joe, listen, not everybody's Bruce Willis. And not everybody's these famous actors that go to the Playboy mansion. Okay. Most people, when you pursue that life, you know where you end up? Broke and broke in. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I did too. Okay. I had to rebuild my life because I had a warped idea of what I wanted. So I want to make that clear because you said a lot of people might think that we don't know what that's like. Okay. We haven't always been, let's just say, faithful Roman Catholics and understand the truth of things. Okay. And I understand the temptation in all that. But what we're here to do is try to emphasize to people when you gear your life towards that, you are headed for destruction. And even if you don't destroy yourself, which you can make an argument, I could hear people say, well, Hefner lived till 91 years old. He lived till a ripe old age. He was still surrounded by women, M&Ms, drugs, and Pepsi Cola. Okay. I could hear people saying that he caused a lot of destruction for other people. Okay. He was empty of God. He didn't want God. And then he emptied God for other people too by tempting him. Quite frankly, he made pornography sophisticated and classy, according to David Larson. Joe, how many times growing up did you hear men say, I read Playboy for the articles, for the interviews? And there were some great interviews, okay, in Playboy. I'm not
Well, that's why he was a genius. I mean, he was a marketing genius. You're right, Joe. That's what he convinced people, he would have quote unquote sophistication to porn. And he blended the two somehow, and it worked. He made millions and millions of dollars. I say this to people all the time, dude. People who make money, that's not an accident. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you make money, dude, I work in the money business. If you make money by accident, you won't keep it. I'm going to tell you right now, people who sustain wealth are not dumb. They could be satanic, they could be twisted, but they're not dumb. You don't make money by mistake. And Hugh Hefner knew what he was doing. He understood something that other people didn't. And like you said, he sold it and made a fortune. But all I'm saying is this: on the surface, his life may have appeared wonderful. It's shallow. Anything outside of God, when you base your life, I'm telling you this right now, I don't care what it is. I don't care. It looks good. It's shallow. Augustine said it. He's 100% correct. And to a degree, I've lived it. And what keeps me on the straight and narrow is this. I know that if I do certain things, go to confession, live my vocation as a married man, as receive the Eucharist in a state of grace, I will have peace. I will have joy. I sleep like a baby and have for many, many, many years.
Well, see, the thing is, but
you can't have both. That's all I'm going to say. And that's what people think they can, Joe. But you cannot have both. You cannot have your cake and eat it too in this life. If you're 30 and you haven't figured that out by now, you're not an adult.
Well, let's explore that. Okay. I mean, I brought up earlier about, like, let's say when I was in my 20s and that mindset. We're talking about Hugh Hefner here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. He actually bragged about this. Now, there's a reason why, Joe Rossinello, our enemies, and when I say our enemies, I mean our spiritual enemies. There's a reason I've always thought this. There's a reason why they hate the Bible. They hate the Bible because the Bible says too many things that cut them to the heart. Okay. And one of which, and we brought it up on this show before on the Crusade channel. Okay. St. Paul said straight up, okay, when I was a child, I thought as a child. When I became a man, I learned to put away childish things. Joe, if you ever wanted a timeless lesson in manhood, that could encapsulate it right there. At some point in your life, if you think you're going to be Hugh Hefner, okay, if you think you're going to make millions of dollars and go and hang out with a bunch of basically hookers, okay, that's what they are. All right, a bunch of hookers at the Playboy Mansion, or you don't even have to go to the Playboy Mansion. You could go, you could find it wherever you want. If you have enough money in your pocket, you can go to New York City or anywhere else. You could find all the sex you want. Okay, if you think that you're going to do that and you're going to have any sort of a fruitful life, then you're mistaken. My problem is that the people that do that, God help them. Okay, my problem in this whole thing, Joe Resinello, is that they want to sell this. We started this conversation by talking about the lie becoming the truth and the truth becoming a lie. They're trying to sell this as a good because guys like Hugh Hefner, guys like Jeffrey Epstein, quite frankly, okay, when you've had all this sex, you have all this money, you have all this sex. As you mentioned earlier, Joe, if I have steak every day, eventually I have to find something else. When you're having sex every day and it's unbridled and you could do it with whoever you want because you have enough money, if you can't get it freely, you could just go and buy it. Eventually it grows thin and you have to look to something else. This guy, Hefner, was doing the same. Now, there's a lot of people don't realize this. Hefner was doing the same thing as Jeffrey Epstein was doing. Blackmailing people, filming people. He had cameras in the bushes. See, he needed a different kind of excitement because sex didn't hold it for him anymore. Now he's playing power. Now he's using some sort of power. My point is that they try to sell this to other people as though you and me, because we are on the straight and narrow, married, kids, moving it along, trying to get to heaven, that somehow our life is deficient. That's where I will become judgmental of them and say, that's where you're wrong, because you're trying to basically you're living along the lines, and I'll hand it over to you, Joe. You're living along the lines of the devil. The devil does what he's doing because misery loves company. The devil's miserable. He wants company. Hugh Hefner, Jeffrey Epstein, and people like that are in their heart and in their soul miserable, and they want company.
Well, again, the society has always sold that. I mean, from the very beginning, Adam and Eve. Eve and Adam didn't eat the apple because it didn't look good. Sin looks good. I mean, Scripture tells us about sin in the Old Testament too, talking about how it makes it's sweet to the taste, but makes your stomach sour. It's like eating, again, I'll use the White Castle analogy. You're hungry and you drive past the White Castle and you eat 6 double doubles because you're starving and then you're sick. That's what sin does. All kinds of sin, not just sexual sin. Listen, I'm 51 years old. I've had friendships the arc of my whole life. We all have family members. We know people for the arc of our whole life. You see how people who chase after plastics, power, money, women, dope, whatever, it ends in a dead end.
Right.
Always. It's a lock. It's not an if. It's mathematical certainty. It's mathematical certainty. You will have a superficial life. You see, the problem is people sometimes don't have the courage. They don't have the courage because I'm going to tell you right now, a life built on Christ doesn't look good on the surface. It's boring on the surface. No one's going to put you on the cover of People magazine. You're married for 60 years. You take the garbage out every night. You mow the lawn. You get up. You go to work every day. You take care of your kids. It's on the surface boring. It doesn't sell, but it's fulfilling. Why is it fulfilling? Christ says it very, very clearly. He says, in order for a life to be full, the seed must die in order to bear fruit. That's Christ gives meaning to the human person. Hugh Hefner took a different route, self-gratification, which does not lead to fulfillment.
Joe Resinello, very good point there. Okay, on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. You're with the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Very good point. Just let's do a little compare and contrast. Okay, immediate self-gratification, delay of gratification. What are you gratifying yourself with? In this particular case, we're talking about Hugh Hefner. Pepsi, M&Ms, cocaine, and sex. That's what, now again, this is according to this documentary, not according to Joe Pasillo, okay? That's what it is. Those are wonderful things to gratify yourself with, right? M&Ms, Pepsi, Coke, and sex, okay? On the other hand, a little compare and contrast, heaven, delaying the gratification, living what you said, a life that doesn't outwardly look good, okay? But yet I get to exist and live with he who is the fulfillment of all desires. I don't think you could compare God to drinking Pepsis all day and scoffing down M&Ms, okay? And you
Scoffing.
could
Haven't heard that one in a while.
right, well, that's an Italianism. It's scoffing it down. But my point is that this is the age-old thing. We learn this when we're kids by good parents who tell us you have to delay your gratification, study hard in school. That's how you will get ahead in life. Well, in the spiritual realm, it's the same thing. Now we all fail, Joe. We all sin. That's why we go to confession. I don't delay gratification, let's say, with the things that I like food and stuff like that, all the time. I don't. Okay. But my point is, but at least we recognize it and strive for something better. And yes, listen, you said it. I'm going to hand it over to you, Joe. You said it. You said this type of life doesn't look good outwardly. Christ hanging on a cross didn't look very good either. In fact, outwardly, you would have said, well, he failed.
Well,
you know where I'm going with that?
No, I do. And again, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Someone's listened to our voice like, oh, heaven. Well, I don't believe in heaven. Okay. Okay. That's fair. But what I'm going to say is this: the path to heaven is heaven. You see, when you're doing the right things, and this is what I was saying before, I've lived a life as a young man where I didn't embrace my Catholic faith, and I've lived a life as embracing my Catholic faith. I know both. I could speak to both. One is infinitely more joyful. One is infinitely more peaceful. One is infinitely more gratifying. And I know that I can't have both, meaning because I'm an adult. That's an adult.
Right.
You cannot have both. I either have one or the other. It's like when you are a kid and you drink liquor and you get drunk, you don't have a hangover. But as an adult, you do. So you will weigh the benefits of being drunk versus the hangover. And you might say, you know something, it's not worth it. I'm not going to drink cheap whatever scotch because I'm going to get a hangover.
Right.
Even good scotch, you'll get a wicked hangover. So you weigh it. My point is this: doing the right thing, i.e. living in a state of grace, is heaven on earth. And the fruit of it will show on earth. And heaven is just that's like, what do you call it? I'm going to use a New Orleans phrase for all you good crusaders out there. That's the langyap. That means the extra. That's the extra. You know what I'm saying? Like the road to heaven is heaven. It's a peaceful, joyful, serene life, which people all say they want, but they don't want to do the things here to have it. Because again, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're an adult. You should have figured that out by now. And I'll give people slack when they're young. I really do. When I see a young kid, they're in their 20s. Listen, you haven't lived enough. You haven't seen enough. You don't listen to people. You don't listen to your parents. But I'm telling you, if you're an adult and you actually still are chasing after that carrot, man, I don't know what to tell you.
No, because that's the thing, Joe Resinello, is that, and that's one of the reasons why we, a couple of years ago, 4 years ago now, we decided to do this show, is because, and again, because we tie it all into the culture war and the politics, and everybody we talk to on our crusade discussions. We've had interviews on the Crusade channel before. We do interviews for the Veritas Catholic Network. It all boils down to the same thing, Joe. Everybody's beefing about the world around them is falling apart. but they don't want to admit that they're contributing to that. That's my biggest problem. Joe, if I was living a debaucherous lifestyle, you know what I'm doing? I'm contributing to the moral rot in America. Doesn't matter if I'm conservative. Doesn't matter if I have an R next to my name and I call myself a Republican. Doesn't matter if I say I read National Review, okay? Doesn't matter if I watch Fox News, okay? I'm part of the problem. Our moral rot is coming from underneath, not from the top. Those scumbags have office because we vote them in, both on the right and the left. Okay. And why? Joe, think of it this way. And that's what we have to emphasize to people. Forget about this political conservative BS. Okay. Our nation is corrupted to the core because of people like Hugh Hefner, but we bought his product. We bought his product for decades. Okay. We bought it or something
Still
close
do.
to it. And
Still
we still do.
Joe, that's a great point. And I'm going to tell you that goes out. Forget about right and left and Democrat and Republican. How about Catholic? I got news for you. We just spoke with one of the folks at Ignatius Press, and he talked about, I'm going to steal it because what he said was so on point. He said, America is as strong as the Catholic Church. And he's 100% correct. The Catholic Church has been weak. That means Catholics have been weak. We don't differentiate ourselves. We're like everybody else. And you know something? We're meant for so much more.
Right.
Why do you settle? And if you're not going after that, what do I mean by that? Living a sacramental life, praying the rosary every day, 15 minutes, going to church every Sunday with your family, 45 minutes, going to confession once a month, 5 minutes. That's it. If you're doing that, your life will shine. And I got news for you. That's how you change people. People, listen, you got to speak the truth. Father Hardin said it. I'm a full believer in that. I do. I speak the truth. No one's going to listen to you if your life doesn't reflect what you say. I'm going to tell you that.
Why would they, Joe?
Bingo,
If I'm in the gym and some guy's trying to tell me I'm doing my exercise wrong, and I look at him and he's a slovenly 300 pounds, I'm gonna say, why would I listen to you?
That's right.
And in fact, if I listen to you, I'm probably going to get hurt because obviously you're not doing your exercises correctly because you're 300 pounds. Okay?
And that's the message to the American Catholic Church, Joe. And I'm going to tell you right now, my mother says this all the time. Show me. Show me.
Well, here, Joe, let me give you a better example because I again, and I'm a fat guy, so I don't want to offend any fat guys out there. I'm not 300 pounds anymore, okay? But I was up there for a little while in my life, okay? Take it this way. How many, let's call them political conservatives can you run across, right? Oh, I love my family, I love my wife, I love my kids, but they got to have a gumad. Come on, let's not be naive. How many guys have a mistress? Okay. How many guys step out on their wives? How many guys that weren't when they're away on a business trip? All right. In other words, they pull the Hugh Hefner and they call a hooker. How many guys do that? And again, I don't care if that sounds judgmental, but then they'll talk to you about political conservatism. And I love my wife and family's everything. Joe, my point is that in many, many ways, we are contributing to this rot.
Well, we do.
We really are.
But I'm just talking about if we want to change society or even just change ourselves and our family, forget about society. How about our house? You know, a lot of people are looking to save the world. Their house is a mess. Or their lives are a mess. That doesn't mean you have to be perfect. But what I'm saying is your life has to reflect Christ. And in order to do that, you have to empty yourself and be filled by Christ. As John the Baptist said, I've said this on many shows, I must decrease, he must increase is one of the most important phrases in the Bible. Memorize it. But here's the thing.
Go ahead.
Holiness doesn't come from you. It comes from God. You can't manufacture it no matter how gifted you are. There are a lot of people on social media in the Catholic blogosphere who say all the right things. Their life does not reflect Christ one single iota. They bear no fruit. Say all you want. Great. You're teaching a course. Who cares? You're arrogant. You're frigging, I don't see an ounce of love in you, not an ounce of peace in you, and no one is listening. You want to change the world, you have to reflect Christ, and then people will listen to your truth. And that is how you change the world. And the way to do that is to empty yourself and be filled by God through prayer, through fasting, through penance, and through almsgiving.
Let me bring it
And
back
that's
to
hard, Joe. And
No,
that's
no,
why no one does it.
Joe
I'm just
Rossinello.
telling you right now. And here's another thing. When you're doing that, no one's watching.
Well,
We're in land.
God is.
Let's talk about, but that's not what people care about. I want to be watched. I want
get it.
5,000 views. I want to be on social media. I want to have 25 billion views. That's not how you change the world. That's how you become a pseudo movie star and no one cares. You'll
Joe,
be forgotten about.
I agree with you. I mean, at one point, I remember I didn't want to start practicing the faith again. This is going back quite some time, probably close to 20 years, because I knew that the Catholic Church was going to say I needed to put down certain things. Okay. In other words, I'm guilty of contributing to the sexual revolution of the 1960s because I bought into it, at least for a short period of time in my life, or maybe one day is too long to buy into that rot. Okay. But here's what bothers me, okay, on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room is always open, crusadechannel.com/chat. You're with the Frontline with Joe and Joe. And when you do see us on social media out there, please like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Help us out. The primary place you could find us is the Frontline TV on YouTube. Here's what bothers me, getting back to Hefner for a second. And I'm not sure where I want to go with this, but let me stay along. Let me throw a thought out to you. In his own words, he said, "If a man has a right to find God in his own way, he has a right to go to the devil in his own way also." Now, I want to hash that out a second, okay? If you want to go to hell, Father Lewis, who was the person who encouraged us to do this show 4 years ago, Father Lewis said not only did he know people who thought they were going to hell, they looked forward to it. How sad is that? Okay. But they looked forward to it. So he says, if a man, he has the right to go to the devil in his own way also. Okay. But then let me ask you this, Mr. Hefner. You're saying he's got a right to do that. Does he have a right to corrupt my child? Does he have the right to try to corrupt me? You want to go to hell. Ultimately, I can't stop you. Okay. I can't stop you. I could preach all I want. I could live try to live a very holy life, okay, which I'm striving to do as a Roman Catholic man. But I'm doing that not just for myself, my wife, my son, and people around me. I'm doing that because I want to benefit my country also, that I know that I'm causing a problem. I am the problem, Joe Rossinello, okay, if I was living that kind of life. My point is this. You want to go to the devil? Go to the devil. I can't stop you. What I can stop you from doing is corrupting our culture through Hollywood, through music. Speak out against Hefner. Hefner was, let me tell you something. I'm going to hand this over to you, Joe. All right. I'm going to hand this over to you. You know what Larson had to say about Hugh Hefner? He said, you got to catch this because I think it's powerful. Without money and fame, Hefner would have been called a common pimp, scumbag, and drug addict. All right. And with money and fame, you know what he did? A guy who was all those things was able to peddle it to other people and wreck their lives and contribute to the destruction of our society. So I'm going to hand this over to you, Joe. You want to go to the devil, you go to the devil, but you're not taking me with you. And moreover, I'm going to fight against you. I'm going to keep fighting against you. Call me all the names you want. Call me a prude, a Puritan, an authoritarian, a fascist, because that's what they're going to call us. I don't care. I'm not going to let you take me down. Moreover, I'm not going to let you take down the people that I love.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about that statement that Hefner made and break it down. Find God in your own way. That is a fallacy. There's one way to God, and it's the narrow way because God said so. You see, that's a lie that many people rationalize to themselves. I'm going my way. Wrong. There is one way. I'm going to quote my friend John Cropper, and his name is Jesus Christ. That's it. He said it. I am the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other way. There's no other way out of the room. We're all dying. And there's one way out. And he's it. He's the way. And it's not, I've said this a million times in Bible studies, in classes, I've taught, heaven is God's house, and you get into it on his terms. They're not your terms. And here's another thing. He's not impressed with you. Everyone thinks they're so impressive. Americans. Oh, Christopher Columbus, look what I've achieved. Look at my diplomas. I'm rich. Look at my house. God isn't impressed with you.
Right.
You get into heaven on his terms, or you don't.
Joe Resinello, let me cut you off right there for a second on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Let's get into that a little bit, okay? Let's talk about that, because remember, we're going to say flat out, Joe and I, we're Catholic men who believe in what the church says, which is that we have no right to say who's in hell and who's not in hell. But I will say this, though. I'm going to relate something that Jesus said to Hefner and to the woman who sacrilegiously calls herself Madonna, okay, and others, many others out there in our culture. What Christ said about those people, Joe, they should be worried about hell. Now, Hefner's dead, but Jesus said, remember something, Joe, there's one thing if you commit personal sin, okay, and I think the church, I'm pretty solid on this, that the church teaches there is a very big difference between myself as the tax collector, let's say, okay, beating my chest for my own sins, okay, and asking for forgiveness, then justifying my sins, and then taking them out to the wider culture. That's why I brought up that woman who calls herself by the name of our Blessed Mother sacrilegiously, and Hugh Hefner. Jesus said, woe to him by whom sin comes to any of these little ones, because it would be better that a millstone were hung around their neck. Joe Resinello, you understand it's a worse sin to corrupt another than to commit that sin on your own and let's say, for argument's sake, repent of it. But when you bring that sin to somebody else and say that that's right, the same way that the abortion movement in America convinces young women that killing their children in the womb is something good and noble and moral, okay? That's a major problem. That's a major problem. We had an interview recently. What was the name, Joe? Katie, the Natural Family Planning, Katie Solanas.
It was a Greek, Solanas. She was a Greek name.
Right. And we mentioned in that conversation, look at all the lives. See, what we get, Joe Resinello, by, from the media and everything else is Hefner and all the people who went to the Playboy mansion and Madonna. They all lived this liberated life. It's all great. They will never, ever, ever, ever want to talk to the people whose lives they ruined. Now, again, everybody makes their own choices. But when you're young and you're you can easily be influenced and you're kind of malleable. Okay. How about all the women's lives who were ruined by Madonna and her message of sexual liberation and rebelling against their parents and rebelling against their Catholic faith? How many women thought that they were going to live that kind of life? Okay. And they turned out and they were wrecked and destroyed by the time that they were in their 40s. Abortions, lesbianism, all of it, because Madonna said it was such a great thing to do. Do they ever want to be held accountable for the lives that they ruined? Would Hefner ever want to be held accountable for the marriages that his empire, his kingdom, his false kingdom of pornography contributed to the destruction of those families because he targeted men? But nobody ever wants to talk about that, Joe Resinello. They say, well, people make their own choices. They do. They do make their own choices. And ultimately, people are responsible for their actions. But we don't need to promote this crap in society is my larger point. And we have an obligation as Catholics, men and women, to fight against it with everything that we have. I'll hand it over to you, Joe Resinello.
Well, here's the thing. There's something inside of all of us, because the natural law is written on our hearts. When we do what's good, we feel good. When we do what's bad, we don't. There's a time too, sadly, when the conscience goes black and the heart grows hard and you can no longer recognize your own bad behavior because it becomes the norm. But what you can recognize is good behavior in others. You will know them by their fruits. Watch what people do. That's the key. I tell my brother that all the time. He's not in the church, he's not in the faith. I tell him this. Watch what people do. And that is what should trigger with people. Why is my life a mess and this person's isn't? Why does it seem to work for them and it doesn't for me? You see, that's where conversion takes place. No one converts another. The Holy Spirit converts people, but the Holy Spirit works through you. People see what they believe. You see, that's why we have to change. We have to change. And when we change, you will change others, not by what you say, but by the fruit you bear. I'll tell you just from my own experience in my life, when I go to church, and I'm not patting myself on the back because I'm not the best father in the world, nor am I like, the best husband. I try my best, but I'm not going to say I'm the best by no means. When I receive communion and I walk down from the priest and my 5 kids, I'm carrying one. I got another kid in tow. We got 5 kids. Every person in the church is looking at us. Every single person in the church is looking at us. That is how you change society.
Mm-hmm.
That is how we have to die to ourselves. You see, we're not willing to do that, Joe. What we do right here is real easy. It's real easy. If you have a couple brain cells, you read something and you just start talking. Dying to yourself is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the more Catholics do that, the more we'll change this country.
Of course.
And this is what, if you really want to change this country, if you really want to change your house, forget about the country. If you really want to help your family, forget about the country. You have to die to yourself. And when you do that, you will change others because God works through emptiness in you. When you empty yourself of yourself, we don't want to do that.
Well, I'll tell you something that we do have to. Well, on a very Joe, you're preaching the truth. Okay, no question. But again, on a practical level, we do need to empty ourselves. We need to empty our homes too. We need to keep this crap out of our homes. I don't care what it is. Somebody mentioned in the chat room, somebody said something about the filth, the cable nudity that we let into our homes. Okay, is it hard? Is it as, let's say, open as, let's say, Playboy magazine? No, it's cable nudity. It's a little bit more subtle, but it's garbage nonetheless. It's evil nonetheless. Men have to throw away their porn stash. In fact, there probably isn't even a porn stash anymore. You have these now. You have cell phones. So you don't even need, you remember how, like, back in the day, like, a guy's going to have his porn stash in his basement, okay? Doesn't need it anymore. He can burn it all because now everything is done electronically. It's all at your fingertips. We need to rid ourselves of this nonsense. You want to talk about slaves? Hugh Hefner was great at making a slave out of himself. He was also great at making a slave out of other men. That's what the whole pornography industry does. Joe, what you're talking about are those who have come to the realization that there is a change that's needed. When you are so mired in the muck, as many men are, because of people like Hugh Hefner and people like him that promoted pornography for decades and decades and decades, Joe, quite frankly, the scales on their eyes are very thick. They don't see the need to change. Now, I want to segue, and I want to talk about this because I wasn't going to talk about this tonight. I didn't realize that it was kind of tied in. In fact, it ties in very, very well. An article by Regis Martin talking about, have we lost our hunger for the bread of life? Now, look at it this way. I had asked you a question, Joe, before we went on air. Okay. And I want to pose that question to you now while we are on air. It's one thing to say that that's not Jesus in the Eucharist. That's a position that some people take. They just quite frankly don't believe it. But that's not necessarily where Regis is going with this article. And this is the question I want to ask you. Have, in fact, as a culture and Catholics in America, have we gotten to the point where we're convinced or we're tempted to believe that we're not even hungry? You know where I'm going with that, Joe? In other words, that we don't need the Eucharist. Whether we believe it's Jesus or not, this culture teaches us that we're not hungry because we're fed in all these other ways. And with that, I want to hand it over to you because I'm interested in your thoughts.
Well, we clearly eat out of the garbage. I mean, but it shows, Joe.
That's one way of putting it, Joe.
I mean, but it shows. I mean, like I want to, because I think this is a great article. There's so much here. It shows the garbage dump that we've chosen to eat in this culture has bore bad fruit. And it's right in front of your eyes, but people don't connect the dots between the two. People make excuses why they're not, but many of the excuses comes to, I just don't want to change. I don't want to give up X or Y or Z. I'm mired in my own sin, or I'm a slave to it, and I'm not interested in changing. Even if you see the better, I'm not going to do it. I will not serve. What did Flannery O'Connor say in this article? I think it's very important because a lot of people make the excuse like, I'm leaving the church because, of Catholics. This is what she said. Don't you, Flannery O'Connor, for those who may not know, she's a Catholic author, very famous American Catholic author. She from the South, Southern Catholic author, probably the most famous Catholic author, one could argue.
She famously said at one point, if the Eucharist is a symbol, then to hell with it.
Well, there you go.
Joe. Right.
She said, but don't you realize that the only thing that's going to make the terrible world we are coming to endurable is the church, and that the only thing that makes the church endurable is that somehow the body of Christ, and on this body we are fed. You see, what makes the church is the sacraments. And those who leave it don't understand the sacraments because they haven't encountered the Lord in the sacraments. Because if you did, you would never leave.
Right.
The church is the answer to the problems of the world.
Joe,
not the source of them.
Right. And the thing is, once we realize, and this is a message, here Joe and I are on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. If you're just joining us, we're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. One thing, Joe, that I would emphasize to people in this Catholic world out there in America, particularly people who have podcasts and people who are well known and people who the audience likes to listen to. We're blessed by God's grace. There are many people who like to listen to us and they appreciate the things that we talk about. Joe, one of the ways we're defeating ourselves is by arguing with one another, because again, if we're all the body of Christ, I don't care who you are. I don't care what show you have. Okay. All of these people are Roman Catholic. They believe in the Eucharist. They receive the Eucharist. But we are divided, unfortunately. And let me tell you something, that division is not doing us any good either. The body of Christ is not supposed to be divided, okay? It is supposed to be united. I'd like to remind our Protestant brothers and sisters of that, who insist that the body of Christ is not divided. 40,000 Protestant denominations later, they still insist that. But even in the Catholic world, we can't judge them. You want to know why? We're not united as Catholics. We don't put up a unified front. And I want to emphasize that. Okay, because that's one thing. Michael Matt, God bless him. Okay, Michael Matt at the Remnant has been calling for this now. And I'm Joe, quite frankly, there are Catholics out there that kind of they I won't say make fun, but they kind of give him short shrift when he says we have to unite the clans. I think he's spot on. We're so divided in the Catholic world. It's so hard for us to put up a unified fight against the pornography, against the debauchery, against abortion, against homosexuality, against gay marriage, against transgenderism, against all of it, because we're all divided. Why, if I'm on the outside of the Catholic Church, would I listen to all you guys? All you guys are arguing amongst yourselves.
That's a good point. And we're divided because we're not converted, Joe. You see, a converted soul is not divided. Believe it or not, you're not converted. You think you are. You're not. You see, I don't care what anyone else is doing. I have to care about me. Am I converted? Me. You see, we shouldn't worry about anybody else. We should worry about ourselves. Where is my heart? Is it pure? Is it filled with the love of God? If it's not, you're not converted. You think you are. You
Right.
see, we're not doing what we're supposed to do. If Catholics will, I'll refer to Anthony Ryan once again. America is as strong as the Catholic Church. Bishop Strickland said this, and I actually used this recently. He said, do we actually believe the things we teach and say? Because if we did, things wouldn't be this way. Speaking of which, and this talks to what Flannery of Connor said, and I've meditated on these words of Jesus Christ. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life within you. None. Zero. I've been on elevators with people who make a lot of money, and I look into their eyes and they're dead. They're walking dead. I could hear it in the tone of their voice. I could see it in them. They're dead because of what Jesus just said. We have to animate our lives with the life of God, and then we'll change people. Most importantly, we'll change ourselves, and people will see it.
Joe Rossinello, but aren't you also coming by giving that example? But then you're bringing it back to the original point of our conversation here at the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Okay, is slavery. The person's dead because the person's a slave. Doesn't matter if you're a slave to sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, food. Okay, if you're a slave, you're a slave, and you know what you are when you're a slave? You're miserable, as they say in Italian. Okay,
Absolutely.
you're you're
That's
you're
a
you're
fact,
you're
Joe.
you're miserable. Okay.
There's
Um,
100%.
and
You know,
and that's the thing, because I will say this. I do want to bring up one more quote from this article from Regis Martin, because I like the way Simone Weil put it, because that's part of what we're talking about here tonight at the front line with Joe and Joe, about not allowing ourselves to be blinded. See, that's really what we're talking about here tonight, is that Hefner blinded us. The people like Madonna, they blind us, okay? Now, again, we're fallen human beings, so we could fall into temptation, but we have to fight our way out of it. I brought up on the show before, Joe, the Catechism says very clearly that the whole of man's history is a dour combat between man and the forces of evil. Dour combat. It's a struggle. Every time you struggle with sin, the church is saying, yes, that's the whole point. Don't succumb to it. Struggle against it, and with God's grace, you overcome it. Simone Weil wrote, the danger is not lest the soul should doubt whether there is bread, but lest by a lie it should persuade itself that it is not hungry. And that comes from that blindness you're talking about, Joe Rossinello. We have to get back in America. I mean, we've had people on our show that are talking about it all the time, unabashedly, who say America needs to be more Catholic. We had Timothy Gordon on the show. He wrote a book, Catholic Republic. He didn't say America needs to be more Catholic. He said America was always Catholic. We just don't talk about America in Catholic terms. We need to have a good dose of the practical application of the Catholic faith when it comes to individuals and preaching the good news of Jesus Christ and his church, okay? But we also have to apply Catholic principles in our families, to ourselves, in our society, and everything else. There's your battle. Mostly, Joe Rossinello, I'm going to hand it over to you for the final couple minutes, because we're going to have to run at the Crusade channel, always on air. We have to open our eyes. And if they are open, we have to get the scales off of them. That's what's leading to people like Hugh Hefner having hundreds of millions of dollars and wrecking people's lives.
I think you're right. Our eyes have to be open, but first we have to open our hearts and we have to bend our knee. I mean, it comes down to that. You know, the life of a disciple is that of a follower. That's what discipleship means. I follow you. And in order to do that, we have to be humble and we have to be obedient. That there lies the Satan's words. I will not serve. We have to ask ourselves that. Where in our hearts aren't we serving? What haven't we surrendered? There's a lot. There's a lot. That's what
Mhm.
Lent is about, is to scour our hearts and see, what are we attached to? What haven't we surrendered? What part of our lives? And when we do that, we're free. We're free. And it shows. People who do that, I'm telling you right now, you could believe whatever the heck you want. When you see somebody that's alive, truly alive, oh, you'll recognize them. You could call it whatever you want. You'll recognize them. When we start doing that, we change ourselves, we change our families, we change our communities, we change our nation, we change the world. You don't do that, nothing changes. Zero.
Well, that's a great place to end it, Joe Resinello. I'm just going to finish with this. You mentioned Jesus said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you." Hugh Hefner would have been wise to take that lesson, and so should we all. I do want to point out, because it's very important to Joe and I, because Joe and I like to think that we're doing something to help people come into the church, to convert to the Catholic Church. We certainly pray for the conversion of all people and our own continued conversion. Okay. Our friend Gene Wise is in the chat room. Gene is moving towards the Catholic Church. Gene, I want to let you know. I can't speak for Joe, but I'm sure you're in his prayers. I pray for you by name whenever I pray the rosary, that you convert to the faith if you haven't completely already. We pray for you. We love you. And we're grateful that God has given us the opportunity to do what it is that we're doing. So we just want to let you know that we're praying for you. So we want to thank you all out there for joining us here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room at the Crusade Channel is always open, crusadechannel.com/chat. And go on the website. Go on crusadechannel.com. Kick the tires. Look at some free stuff that the King Dude, Mike Church, put up there. We know you're going to want to support the Crusade Channel. Also, if you like, please support Joe and I at thefrontlinetv.com, thefrontlinetv.com, and where you see us on social media, primarily right now on YouTube. I mean, we have a pretty good following there, thanks to Jonathan Ross up in Canada. So you could follow us at the Frontline TV. The Frontline TV. Hit the like button, subscribe button, share button, all those buttons. We're told that they help us out pretty good. So either way, we want to thank you all. Remember, you're all in our prayers. So thank you all so much for joining us here. Thank you again, Mike Church, for being gracious to Joe and I and letting us have this broadcast on the Crusade Channel. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We will talk to you soon.
What does a blockchain actually do? Apple sells iPhones, Google sells ads.